Welcome back to the Biohacker Babes podcast. Thanks for joining us today and this Monday morning.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I loved having you both on my podcast. So I'm excited to be here and chat and share some info with your audience.
Awesome. It's nice to
Yeah.
continue the conversation. And we are sort of like, this is an ever evolving conversation. There's so much to dig into here, but we're
So
really
much.
excited to have your expertise as a licensed mental health counselor. So thank you. We're going to talk to our women primarily, but you can kind of chime in. This is for the men as well, would you say?
Yeah, I think this can apply to every, of course, everybody. Yeah. If we dive a little bit into we're not talking about male infertility enough, but if we're going to dive into a little bit of how emotions impact our health and our fertility health, it could be mostly helpful for women. And I'm happy to share sort of my personal journey with that, as well as, my professional expertise.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you. I think not enough women share their personal experiences. So this is going to be really awesome. So we did chat on your podcast a little bit just about like the societal pressures on women trying to get pregnant, after the age of 35, we're considered geriatric. Eye roll moment. But we were
I will.
talking on your podcast about, as we biohack health and longevity, we can actually slow down our aging. We can reverse our biological age. So, like, these numbers are really kind of irrelevant. When it comes to like the emotions and the pressures from society, culture, there's a lot that's sort of trickling down. So,
Mhm.
mindset, like our brain, really is the director here that sends these signals to our physiology. So, we're going to talk about how that really affects our health overall. But how do you see mindset really affecting how the biology expresses from a top down?
Oh my gosh, in such a huge way. And I think if we're gonna kind of link it to fertility, I don't think we're talking, I think there's a lot we're not talking about enough. And to your point about sort of the messaging and the narratives around age, it puts us in this like state of stress. And when we talk about our body being in a state of stress, what happens there is our sympathetic nervous system is activated, right? Like this is like our fight or flight system. This is the system that's working to protect our body. And in short activations, that's fine. But if we're in like a chronic state of stress, a prolonged chronic state of stress, so many things are going to be happening internally to our body and to our physiological health. So that would be, probably wreaking havoc on our immune system, which is so important for fertility. I was sharing with you guys offline, my personal journey now is doing all this immune testing to figure out what's happening in my body. So long activations of the sympathetic nervous system are really horrible for our body. And if we're continuing to be ingrained with messages that say by this age, you can't have children or your potential for children are starkly declined, like we're probably in a chronic state of stress around those narratives if we're 35 and older. So thinking about being in prolonged periods of that chronic emotional stress and what it does to your body is not helpful at all to our fertility. So conversations like these, platforms that are promoting other timelines or emphasizing biological age over chronological age are really important to start to remove the fear and the stress. And I've seen it in so many women that I'm speaking to, and there is a huge movement to freeze eggs, and that's very, very helpful. But I think we need to be educating even more on what's possible. And mindset is huge in emotional health, huge in emotional health, and mind body goes together. So if we're taking care of our emotional health, it's going to have impact and ripple effects on our physical health.
For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And I've kind of played around with this like as a case study, but also a practice for myself because I'll be 41 this year. And so I'm at that age where people are like, are you guys going to have kids? And if I pause, they're like, well, they kind of hint like at the age. But I'm now, because of what we talked about, I've worked on my biological age. I'm less fearful, but it's so interesting. It's so pervasive. Like even other people in the conversation are like scared for me. So it really is just like, let's all like calm it down and know that there's some other possibilities here while being engaged and on top of our health.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's wonderful. I mean, you guys have done so much work in the space, and so you're well versed and well informed of sort of again, the biological age. A lot of women are not. And this is what's amazing about what you guys are doing, these conversations we're having is because we're not informed, because there aren't stronger messages of reassurance, a lot of women stay in this chronic state of stress, emotional distress, worried about their age. And, it's interesting, and this has been my personal journey as well. I feel like there's less focus on healing our emotional wellness versus medications, protocols. Even for me, like even I've gone like a little bit like more of a holistic route, but then I become so stressed about the food I'm eating. Am I taking all my supplements? Like all of these kind of things we feel like we can control. And for me and for a lot of women, what we ignore is our emotional health and wellness. And I love this conversation because I think if women can put the two together, even thinking about this conversation today, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like killing my immune system and I'm like probably so inflamed. And if we can make the connection to the importance of managing our emotional health, to our physiological health, and to our fertility health, I think that's going to change a lot of things for women. And, we were joking a little bit offline where, and there's all these like reels and memes and things on Instagram about just relax. And like no woman going through fertility wants to hear just relax. But I think understanding the science of like what it means to relax could be helpful. Like that blanket statement in itself isn't helpful. You want to tell someone to like kind of go F off, like, how can I relax? But understanding what regulating your nervous system can do for your health, that's the statement. It's like, let's, find emotional safety. Let's regulate the nervous system. Let's get into a parasympathetic state where we're calm and relaxed and our body feels safe. And when our body's in that safe, like it can heal. Our body is meant to heal. But if we're in, again, these prolonged activations of the sympathetic nervous system, we can't heal. So yeah, like moving away from like the just relax to understanding why it's important to relax could be very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating when you think about the fact that if the body is in a stress state, it doesn't want to reproduce. Like it's as simple as that. Like human evolution, if we were going through a famine or there was a war or something, like, yeah, not a good time to bring a baby into this world. So you're like, okay, thank you, body. You're looking out for me. But now we're in a world where we're dealing with the mental emotional stress, the environmental stress, the societal stress, like all the things. So yeah, we do need to really like look at the whole picture. And I'm curious about the immune thing. I haven't really heard much about the immune connection. I mean, I know that when you're sympathetically driven, your immune system kind of shuts down, but what's the connection to fertility with that?
So if your immune system is overactive, it could attack your embryo.
Oh,
right. So
okay.
like if you have an overactive immune system, yeah, and I think that is what's happening for me. And I shared offline with you guys that I'm going through all this immunological testing. So the way my doctor explained it to me, it's like when you get a transplant, like they do these immune suppression protocols. So your immune system doesn't attack the organ. And he's like, it's the same idea. He's like, except we're not going to suppress it for too long. We're going to suppress it for the first trimester. So again,
how do they do that? Is that like a medication or something?
Yeah, medications. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
I also think, managing your emotional health, and we can talk about ways to do that here if you guys want, is also important. But for some people, they need more support than that. And I'm one of those people. And so they do all this extensive blood work to identify kind of what's happening in your immune system. And they tailor a specific protocol for you. So what I might do for immune protocol for IVF could be very different for somebody else. So right now we're trying to figure out what that is for me through all this testing.
Yeah. One more thing about the immune thing. I haven't really thought about this till now, but we see there's a major rise in autoimmune conditions. Like we've seen it skyrocket, especially since COVID. And even in, I would say like quote unquote, healthy females, we're seeing a huge rise. And Dr. Mark Hyman, who started, is it Function Health? I think is his company. He shared he's seeing like 35% of like his healthy females that are looking to optimize are having testing for a positive ANA, which is like the first sign of autoimmune, which that's wild. I mean, if you have a positive ANA, I'm sure that has an impact on fertility.
Oh, totally. I mean, totally. I mean, I have a couple autoimmunes, and I think I had said this to you both on when we recorded for my podcast. if you if you look at me, if you are perceiving me externally, you would think I'm a healthy person. I thought I was a healthy person. And I start to do all this testing because of, this fertility journey, which is a blessing in disguise to find these things. But I have a couple autoimmune diseases. And
Interesting.
again, I think you think about the load on women, the mental emotional load on women, all the hats that we wear. I'm not surprised by that number. I think we are in chronic states of burnout and overwhelm very often. And, what's interesting too about sort of this activation of the sympathetic nervous system is sometimes we don't even realize that we're in a state of stress. Like our mind is not realizing we're in a state of stress because we have normalized these sort of overly stressed environments, systems.
Yes, we have.
Ways of being. We have normalized emotional suppression. So we're running around thinking we're all good. Our mind is telling us that, like it's normal to be in like high stress environments. And our body knows. Our body's like, no, we're on high alert. Sympathetic nervous system is activated. And then all of these things are happening. And because we're unaware, because we've normalized this, we're not doing anything to regulate our nervous system. So that's when like shit really starts to go down in your body.
Yeah. And I feel like the normalization comes with suppression of emotions or just distracting ourselves away. So like our cells can be in complete chaos. We can have this imbalance in our immune systems, right? So we have like if our adaptive immune system, we have the Th1, Th2, and with this autoimmunity, it's like an imbalance between the two. So like you could convince yourself that you're not stressed, but that does not mean that there's not chaos under the surface. Like we've all seen that graphic of the iceberg.
Yes.
Like what's above the water versus what's underneath. And I think what you said about normalizing, it's like, oh yeah, we're so used to that iceberg above the water that like no one's paying attention to underneath.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of what's happening too is, not only just this awareness, like mental, emotional lack of awareness, but we're not tuning into our bodies. I think we talked about this last week too. Like we are not attuned to our bodies. Like our body is so brilliant and so smart. And what's happening is too smart. And what's happening is like, this is not a bad, being in a state of sympathetic, that activating sympathetic nervous system is not bad. Our body is meant to do that. It's supposed to activate and then kind of shut off and you're supposed to recover. It's when you're in prolonged states of that is when it becomes problematic. And so when we're not in tune with our body, like life is moving fast, time is moving fast. There's all of these pressures, like we're saying, our body's probably a lot of times probably screaming at us and we're not listening, even through my journey, especially particularly with like the thyroid stuff and the Hashimoto's, my functional medicine doctor would be like, do you have any symptoms? And I'm like, no, I have no symptoms. Okay, is that actually true? Or am I just not attentive to the systems, the symptoms and what my body's telling me? And I think and then also if we're talking about sort of mental, emotional health, we create all these narratives around things to kind of rationalize. Could I say, yeah, I'm tired, I have a toddler, or is it I'm tired, my thyroid antibodies are through the roof right now, my Hashimoto's is activated. So really getting aware and in tune with our body is so important. I mean, this is everything that's our body is working to take care of us. Like our body is working to protect us.
Yeah. I think like sitting down and filling out a health questionnaire, just like for yourself, like find a good one online. I can send you one if you want to do this, but asking yourself like all the different questions, like what are my nails like? Like, what is my skin like? My hair, like my digestion, like, do I really have any bloating or constipation? Like actually going pen to paper, then you're like, oh, wow, there's actually kind of a lot going on that like in the typical rat race day, you're just like, oh, I'm a little tired, I'm okay. But really, if you step back and look at that, you're like, oh, there's a lot that my body is telling me.
That's so wild and funny that you say nails, because I started to use my nails as an indicator of my health, like before kind of
wild.
Revamping, my nails would break and they were so brittle. And now I'll look at my nails, I'm like, okay, like they look okay. Like maybe my insides are healthy. So that's interesting that you say nails. Yeah. And I think the education is so important. Like, I probably wouldn't have known to like look at my nails for a sign of health or so. I think, having questionnaires like that also just slowing down to actually do it is important. You know, I think there's a lot to be said for slowing down and taking time. Again, we can move through life like so blindly and unaware, and it just keeps passing us by. So I love that. I love that because I think it also simplifies how to kind of cue into your body, even if it's just like, okay, what do the nails look like?
Yeah. So much you can see. And your
Or
tongue.
this, oh my gosh, your tongue, your eyes, under the eyes, the skin. Oh my gosh, it's endless. But we don't want to pay attention because a lot of times if we pay attention, then it's like, oh, shit, there's a problem, right? But we do have solutions for it. But I think what you said about slowing down, you know, we're so in alignment here on this podcast. We have to slow down to get those cues. But again, another problem is you slow down and then you feel the fatigue. Like if we just keep ourselves going, we don't feel it. That's always
like that moment where you're like buzzing around and then you sit and everything hits you. Like there's a reason for that. All of a sudden you're
nobody wants to feel that.
Yeah, that's like when you get sick, right? It's like you finally slow down and then you get hit with like a cold or something because your body's like, okay, you're finally gonna like take some time to rest. Boom.
Yeah, you're gonna listen.
Going.
Finally. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing too. It's like that's the way the body works for you too. I mean, if you're not going to listen, that your body is going to finally do something that makes you pay attention, which is you know, it could be a really unfortunate thing. It could be a thing like one morning you just can't get out of bed. You're so exhausted, and your body's going to be like, okay, you have to start listening to me. The other thing I want to normalize, and this kind of wraps into the emotional health and well-being, is that there is a lot of fear around finding out if something is wrong. So there is a lot of avoidance of going to doctors. I see this a lot in my practice with women, particularly overall health, but also like fertility health. I'm a big advocate of like, let's just know your fertility health. Let's go find out what it is. And a lot of women will avoid that because they're afraid of that, right? And so then here we are again in a state of emotional distress, fear, again, activating a lot of things in our body. But I do want to normalize it. There is a lot of fear for some people finding these things out. And I think it's important that we understand and acknowledge that that's that fear and that we process that fear, right? So unprocessed emotions, suppressed emotions, again, activate the sympathetic nervous system, again, create all of this kind of havoc in our body. And that's one technique. It's like, let's name what you're feeling. Let's understand what you're feeling. Let's unpack it. Let's process it. And there's so much healing in doing that. What that does is regulate your nervous system, and we want to be in a state of regulation. But yeah, I think it's important to like be honest with ourselves. It's okay to be afraid. Let's normalize that.
Yeah. So we can be proactive and prevent. And then there's also this honesty piece, which can be scary. But you said if we can get in there and be honest, you mentioned before we started the podcast that we can really prevent sort of the secondary, or I don't know if there's even like a third layer of emotions. If we can just be honest with that first one, we stop the cascade of stress.
Totally.
Can you explain what that process looks like?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. What I see a lot in my practice is, it's not the primary emotion that is causing us the most distress. It's the secondary emotion. So the secondary emotion is, what are we saying and feeling about what we're feeling? And when we're there, what I believe and what I've seen in my practice with so many of my clients is like being in the secondary emotion is what causes us so much stress and distress and like bad feelings. So for example, if you're sad about something, instead of just letting yourself feel sad about something, acknowledging that you're sad about that, being in that a little bit and processing that, we're judging ourselves for feeling sad. We blame ourselves for feeling sad. We tell ourselves we shouldn't feel sad. That's all the secondary emotion stuff. And that's the stuff that's going to make you feel really heavy and really bad. And so also what happens too, when we're stuck in secondary emotion, we're not doing anything to process the primary emotion. So the primary emotion stays unprocessed, unresolved, suppressed, wreaking havoc on our body. And then we compound it with the secondary emotion. So it's a really problematic process. And, the most healing, regulating, compassionate thing to do is acknowledge and name the primary emotion. Don't judge it. Get curious about it. Okay, I'm afraid to go to the doctor. I'm feeling fear. Why am I feeling fear? What am I afraid of finding out? What if I do find this thing out? And so, but because we're not slowing down, because we're so distracted, because there's like life is happening so fast, we don't stay with primary emotion. We don't work with primary emotion that much. Unless, you know, if you have spaces to do that. And I think therapy is a great space to do that.
Yeah. Do you think that this kind of stems from like possibly us growing up thinking these emotions are bad, these emotions are good? Like some
Yes.
of that labeling? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's cultural too. There's a lot of cultures where it is not accepted or normalized to express and honor emotion. You may grow up in a family, and even if it's not a cultural layer, you might grow up in a family that doesn't model that, teach that, accept that. So yeah, absolutely. And you know, a lot of times it's rewiring and learning to do that, and most times like in adulthood.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely played around with that in the past couple of years, like really like sitting down and it's like, what is the emotion I'm feeling? And I literally like look at a list of options and I'm like, maybe it's that or that. And like sometimes you kind of mix things up between anger or anxiety or depression or sadness. Like, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like
Feelings
to look
too.
at like you guys mentioned the iceberg, like anger being the tip of the iceberg. You know, anger for me, like the way I work with anger in my practice is it's the least vulnerable emotion. So it's really not usually anger. There's so much underneath that, but obviously like vulnerability can be difficult for a lot of people, but anger usually the root is like pain or hurt. Uh, but
Right.
again, it's not very vulnerable to be angry.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so curious to hear more of your process because I keep thinking like Renee and I went through this program of identifying needs and feelings to get really clear because sometimes it just feels like chaos in our brain because we don't know and maybe we're feeling these secondary emotions or maybe even false feelings and we never really get to the root of it. So like identifying like what are my values or needs? What am I not getting that could be causing me to feel this primary emotion? How do you like in a one-on-one or maybe even strategies for people to do at home? What is the process of even identifying that?
well, I love what Renee said because there is like a lot of us therapists will use what's called the emotion wheel, right? And I think first and foremost, it's having the language around what emotions are. So having the wheel is a really nice reference because it gives a lot more language to emotions just versus the ones we know, you know, happy, sad, mad.
Sad.
Yeah, sad. And so the wheel is amazing because there's extensive language. It kind of puts them in buckets. It takes these like ones we really know well and it continues to like break them down into different words to describe our emotions. So I would recommend everyone grab one of those because it's very helpful to have the language and help get clarity on what you're actually feeling. That would be one thing. And when we're talking about needs, I think yeah, again, getting really clear on what they are because a lot of emotions are elicited by an unmet need. And so if we know what the need is, we'll know how to meet it and we might not elicit some of those emotions like sadness or anger. So clarity is key. So again, get the emotion wheel. I mean, you can even look up like what are some, you know, neat, like everybody's in ChatGPT, like put in ChatGPT, like get the language around it. It's really helpful. And if you need help getting that language, there's resources to do that. And I think that's a really good starting point for people.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So
it's like more crayons in your coloring box, right?
yeah, yeah. Good analogy, good analogy. So for women that are feeling the pressure of time, what are the biggest emotions that you see here?
Oh my gosh, grief is a big one. Grief is
Grief.
such a big one. Yeah, I think because there's all these narratives and there's these sort of societal expectations, like we have these outdated blueprints of what life should be and by when, we create a vision around that. And we create a vision around what career looks like, what partnership looks like, what family building looks like. And it's kind of like a blueprint or model that was sold to us, but then we internalize it and we ingrain it to become our own because we're not getting curious about what are our needs, what are our values, what do we actually want. So we kind of carry this vision and we internalize it to be our own and what we actually want. And so when life does not turn out like that, there's so much grief. Like you're grieving this vision you held on to for so long. And I think it's again like acknowledging the emotion, like acknowledging that there is grief, that this wasn't the vision that's come to light yet. I always like to say yet because we never know what's coming to us. So grief is a big one. Anger is a big one, especially when we're talking about like fertility or women getting to a place. Again, anger is like the tip of the iceberg. There's so much underneath that. But I've talked to so many women, myself included, who kind of arrive at this stage in life and maybe aren't partnered up and do want to preserve their fertility, and they start to consider egg freezing. And there's a lot of anger about being there. There's a lot of anger about how much it costs and maybe not having the finances to pay for that. There's a lot of anger about why me? Why am I in this situation? Why do I have to do that? I mean, you'll hear a lot of women talking about feeling empowered by egg freezing. So, yeah, and it's partially true, and that's some people's experience. But for a lot of women, they're angry that they have to do it.
Yeah, I can see that. I
Yeah,
think I
maybe
felt
just
anger going through fertility stuff. I was angry there wasn't an answer. Angry I was told nutrition and acupuncture and anything else doesn't do anything. I was angry that the only payment plan was like this gambling thing. It was like you can get one IVF for 19 grand, or for 35 grand you can get 3 tries. I was like, I feel like I'm at a casino trying to like figure out what's the best
Oh,
payment plan.
yeah.
oh
Um,
my
and then
God.
I was also angry that I felt like there was judgment that I was 26. And they were like, my doctor was kind of like, well, if you're not ready to do IVF, just come back when you're 35. I was like,
Like nothing in between? There's no spectrum that we
yeah,
can.
but like I felt like judgment that I was like too young to be there. I don't know. It was not a good experience.
Yeah, I know. And we were talking about this when we last spoke. It's not, in my experience, gotten much better. And
So
I'm with you,
sad.
Renee. Like, it makes me really, really angry. It makes me, on more of a collective level. I mean, I'm upset for what I've been through, but I try to, and it's been a powerful reframe for me. Again, when we're talking about sort of like, storing emotions in our body and what they'll do to us if we're unprocessed. Like, it's been really helpful reframe to see my journey as purposeful. That I was meant to go through this for a number of reasons. One being learning more about my health, learning more about holistic and functional medicine, learning more about biohacking. I think that's just going to serve me, my family in the long run. So I feel very blessed and grateful for that. I also will be blowing the fertility world up on my podcast when I do this. But I feel
Yes.
really angry that so many women experience what you do, experience what I have, that are dismissed, that are not listened to, where other ways of treating or ways of looking at fertility are dismissed, are, I don't know a better word than shit talked. Makes me really angry. It makes me really angry to go to fertility offices and see a waiting room full of women with no answers, to have doctors, and this happened to me, hold the doorknob while having a conversation with me. That makes, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
Mm,
real story, true story,
I
true,
feel like
true.
that alone makes your heart rate go up. Like, oh God, like
Oh, yes,
yeah.
more
yes.
emotions coming up because you feel unheard and dismayed.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm with you. Like, that makes me really angry. And I'm going to do something that with that anger, right? I'm not going to let it just sit with me and sit in my body. If I did, it would not be healthy for me. So I think knowing that I'm going to do something with that anger, and that's a thing, emotions are cues for us, right? So if we're acknowledging them and listening to them and understanding what's happening in our body, they're useful. They don't have to be heavy or hard. And sometimes they are, but really, again, that secondary emotion is where we add so much more heaviness. So processed emotion is our cues, is telling us something, something we can learn. But what's happening for a lot of people is we're suppressing them, we're avoiding them, we're not acknowledging them, we're judging them. And that's where we stayed in these prolonged activation states of the sympathetic nervous system, because that it's our body recognizing a threat. Have you guys seen the memes where it's like, people do the memes on Instagram where it's like, my body doesn't know the difference between being chased by the bear or having to like stand up on the stage and give a conversation. So our body it really doesn't know the difference. It's like sees this perceived threat of danger. And a lot of times now it's like emotional stress and distress, anxiety, loneliness, grief, a range of things. And so our body is just jumping in to try to protect us.
Right.
Yeah. We have a friend that studies HRV. He calls them paper tigers. That's like the modern day stress. And it
Mm-hmm.
extends to so many aspects. Like our body doesn't know the difference between chemical stress, emotional stress, environmental stress. It's just a stress. And so I
Yeah.
love this reframe that you introduced about just processing it and being honest about it. And it's so hard for me to not think, I'm sorry, this has nothing to do with fertility. I don't know if you watch White Lotus.
I do, but don't
This
tell
is a
me
little
because I'm
dangerous. I'm not going
behind.
to give it away.
Okay.
I'm not going to give it away. But
No
there's this
spoilers.
beautiful, okay, I'm going to try really hard not to spoil the relationship of the three women
Yes, I love
Oh,
the
the show.
dynamic.
So without giving it away, there's like this amazing conversation where one of them literally just on the table, just like processes all this stuff. It's this beautiful therapeutic moment where she just like works through it, just being in company of other women. The point of me saying this is just having the space and feeling safe and being able to talk and process is the
Mhm.
therapy and the regulation in itself a lot of the times.
Yeah, and that brings up
yeah.
a really one point, like sisterhood, friendship, community, right? There's really something to co-regulation, being in company of others that says to your body, I'm safe, right? And even co-regulation can be so strong because even if you're dysregulated, your nervous system is dysregulated, you can be in company with somebody whose nervous system is regulated and it will regulate your nervous system. So that can be being in company of good girlfriends. They have to be safe, really safe. I have to caveat, it has to be a safe relationship. So if you have a good, strong therapeutic relationship with your therapist, that's a space where your body can co-regulate. So yeah, that's such a power. I love that you brought that up because that's such a powerful, powerful tool.
It's like a
Yeah.
tuning fork. Like we were talking about
Oh,
PEMF
yeah.
on your podcast.
You
Like,
guys, I ordered it. Did I tell? I ordered it. I'm
Did
like,
it
oh,
come yet?
not
And
yet.
then
I
okay.
cannot wait.
it's so
So
cool.
excited for
But
you.
it is
So
like you're going to
excited.
tune to the frequencies of the earth. But I think also with our
Oh,
friends, if it's safe, we tune to their positive frequencies, which is healing.
Yeah,
totally.
yeah.
And I think it's, again, if we're talking about attunement and awareness, is noticing who those people are, what relationships give you that, right? We unfortunately we kind of can be engaged in toxic or unsafe relationships. So use your body as a cue to tell you, like, I know I have a great girlfriend and, life is busy, of course, and we get to see each other probably every 3 to 6 weeks, give or take. And like just being with her, everything resets. Like I feel it in my body, I feel it in my soul. And so start to recognize who those people are. And then notice if you are dysregulated, maybe it's simple as like get a dinner date with that friend or those few groups of friends or schedule an extra therapy session. Like I love that when my clients are like, can I have another session this week? So identify where those spaces are, who those people are, and when you're feeling dysregulated, again, you have to tune into your body, seek those spaces out, seek those people out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, actually, two of my friends in my life that do that for me are the founders of the Align Mat. When I mean, they practice what they preach. When I'm with them, it's like I'm on my PEMF mat. Like I just feel my
I
nervous
love that.
system just like thrives when I'm around their energy. And yes, if you can find more people like that in your life. Yeah. And
Yeah.
actually, I think right after we recorded on your show, I saw this Instagram reel and it was these two monkeys hugging in the rain. I tagged Lauren in this. I reshared it. And it was like, what if regulating your nervous system was as simple as this? And it was
Oh,
just like
yeah.
two monkeys hugging in the rain. It was so cute.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's like the perfect example of co-regulation. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, loneliness is also tied to inflammation. I mean, it's a perceived threat, right? We are meant to be in community and we're really not that much anymore. And so it's sort of this idea of like no tribe, no connection, no protection, right? So I am lonely. My body is in danger. There is like constant threat because I am alone. And I mean, we could do a whole podcast on loneliness. So yeah, sort of finding community and places where you can co-regulate is so hugely important to overall health.
I'm
Definitely.
curious what you
Yeah.
see as a counselor, as a therapist, because as a health coach, sometimes I see people that literally have no one else. They have me, the health coach, but they don't have family, they don't have friends. And like, I can't create that for them. How, as a counselor, do you help foster that, knowing like it's not your responsibility to create their community? How do we encourage that?
Yeah, I think the work first is to establish safety, and I think for some people, those things can feel unsafe. Like, so finding community or partnership or you know, we could go on about this, but there's a lot of trauma, distrust, attachment style issues, abandonment issues. So first and foremost, I would make sure that feels safe in someone's body to seek those things out. And if it doesn't, working to establish safety around that. Once there's safety in that, I think, making recommendations on like baby steps on how to do that, or again, what's in therapy, we call it the window of tolerance. So what is someone able to tolerate? And that's, again, talking about what can our nervous system tolerate? And for some people, it's very small. And the work in therapy a lot of times is to build that window of tolerance. And so always making sure it feels safe to establish those kind of connections and relationships. If it doesn't, working to establish that safety. If there is safety, identifying how big or small is the window of tolerance. So if we have a small window of tolerance, we might find very small ways to do that. It might not be like go to speed dating. It might be open an app and just look around and you don't have to do anything with it. So kind of just establishing what is the window of tolerance and how do we work in that. So it might be very small baby steps. But it's really an interesting thing. There's so many people desire connection and we're not talking about it enough, where, there's a lot of vulnerability in acknowledging that. I took a huge step back in my clinical work in 2023, but when I was seeing a huge full caseload, I met so many incredible women in New York City. And this was pre-COVID, you're, working in person, so many cool, fun, interesting women that all wanted friends. All of them wanted friendship. And I'm like, I can't say, you should hook up with this one, you should call this, but I'm like, oh my God, everyone at their core is desiring the same thing. And it, for whatever reason, it's not coming to fruition, whether it's fear, vulnerability, lack of safety, but deep down, everyone has the same desire for connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's human evolution, right? If you weren't in community, you were in danger. So it always goes back to that. And I see a lot of people with social anxiety. So it's like they like want that connection, but like going out and socializing is like a lot on their nervous system. And then they were like, I got to go home and recover for a week. So I don't know. How do you balance that out? Any tips there?
Yeah, I think like exposure therapy is really helpful. Again, identifying the window of tolerance and working within that. Again, establishing the safety. COVID did a real disservice to a lot of people, like really horrible, like really, really horrible. And I think we're still recovering. I think we lost a lot of our social skills, ability to connect. I think we've replaced them with things that are not giving us, our bodies, our nervous systems, our emotions, the same benefit and value as real in-person connection, touch, like we're saying, the hugging monkeys. I think, unfortunately, these generations that are growing up with all this technology lost sort of, I wouldn't even say lost, have not experienced the value of connection and community and in-person experience without a phone or a screen. So it's concerning, especially from like a mental health therapist perspective. It's really concerning.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad we didn't grow up with the technology.
Oh, me too.
So
we
grateful.
Escaped just in time, but even still, I'm like, oh, I hate that I have it now. I hate that I, feel pulled.
I know, but it makes me terrified. I look at my nephews who now, my oldest nephew has a phone. I think about my son. I used to coach. I was a field hockey player and played in college, and I used to coach high school field hockey. And like that was kind of cuspy. I think they, was just starting to use social media, but like their ability to like look you in give you eye contact and communicate with you or have a conversation with you was like really alarming. And,
wow.
When we're talking about like our nervous system and sort of these perceived threats or our bodies, like activation of trying to protect ourselves, like you can kick that off just being on social media. Mm-hmm. Just by picking up your phone on social media, you can kick your body into, an activation state and be stressed, be sad, be comparing, be judging. And if you don't know how to regulate that and you're in it, or you're think about scrolling for 2 hours and what it can do to your nervous system. It's kind of terrifying.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting that we often pick it up to get out of an uncomfortable state and we're just making it worse and worse and worse.
Worse. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Again, I think just bringing attention to what's happening for us. We're mindlessly doing things. And of course we're mindlessly scrolling. So if you brought more attention to it and like you're scrolling, look at what your body's doing. There's moments like, again, all three of us are blessed to not have grown up with it, but even as like fully formed adults, I'll pick it up, I'll see something and I'm activated and I close it and put it right down. But a lot of kids, their brains aren't fully developed. They don't have that regulating technique and they're just in it.
Yeah. You mentioned something about comparison, and that's huge with social media. I actually had my husband and I had a friend that messaged us and was like, I'm sorry, I have to unfollow both of you because I just basically like your life looks too fun and it makes me really sad. And I was like, oh gosh, like I'm never sharing stuff to like make people feel bad. Um, and so that was really eye-opening that they actually reached out and said that. And so how for people that do go on social media and it is like a comparison game, I don't know, do you have any like recommendations other than just get off social media? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have a lot to say on that. I think first, for the example that you gave, a lot of things is how we see it, how we frame it, how we perceive it. They could look at your lives and instead of being jealous or envious of it, they could say, okay, that's a great model. How can we incorporate some of what they're doing into our lives? And we always kind of have this choice of how we perceive things. Our brains are wired to think negatively. But again, if there's like this pause and the space that you create to process, you can reframe something and not be susceptible to the bad feelings that come with comparison. So that would be one suggestion. It's like, again, the comparison cues something in your body, cues something in your mind. So understanding what is it cueing, right? They're comparing to because maybe their life isn't that fun and maybe they need to invite more joy in their life. And it can be helpful. Comparison can be helpful if you're using it as a tool in that way. A lot of times what we do is kind of what it sounds like these friends do is like they judge their own life. They tell themselves their own life is not as joyful or happy or exciting. And then they start to feel bad about that. Right now we're down this spiral of like emotional distress, perceived threat, activation of sympathetic nervous system, all these things, start to kick off. So I would say one is how do we frame this? Right? How else can I look at this that could be helpful to me? Two, I would say, what is this telling me? Why am I activated by this? Why am I comparing and feeling badly? Right? We're never going to compare ourselves to something. Usually, typically, we're not going to compare ourselves to someone or something we don't want. So, if I'm somebody that doesn't want a Ferrari, this is a ridiculous example, but if I'm someone that has no desire to have that type of car or that type of materialistic thing in my life, I'm not going to be activated by somebody that posts about a Ferrari. Now, right. I will be activated by somebody that has a pregnancy announcement. And that's just touching on where I am in my life and what I deeply desire. So if we use it as a cue, it actually could be helpful. And then if we don't go down that rabbit hole of like adding on all those narratives and secondary emotions, the things that we think and say to us elicit emotion are so powerful. And a lot of things that we say to ourselves are negative, right? So they see your life and they're like, ours sucks and ours isn't as fun and nothing is fun. And, we have all these cognitive distortions in messaging that just like elicits really bad emotions. The other thing I like to say about comparison is like, well, especially if we're comparing through social media, we do not know the full picture ever. We know what curated on there. We know what people have decided to put on there. Like that is not the full picture. And even if you do have the full picture, say you're close with somebody and, for example, 30s is a real decade of comparison because you're starting to watch, people partner up, people get engaged, people get married, people have babies. And then some 30-year-olds, like a lot of the ones I talk about on my podcast are not doing those things in that order. I always say, like, look at the whole picture, okay, she's got engaged. Is it a healthy relationship? Is it someone you'd want to be with? Is it the type of person you'd want to be with? We're just comparing to the one thing. And that's where it becomes pretty problematic.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. It's like the lens that we're looking through, and then we're also like looking through whatever colored glasses at a small piece of the pie. Yeah. So it kind of comes back to that very classic advice, like check in with yourself before you engage in these things. But, our devices are pulling us all the time. I'm curious to kind of run with this fertility lens and journey, like being triggered by someone else that has what you're trying to do. What are maybe some other regulatory techniques that you would share with women on this journey?
Yeah, we were talking on the offline about this before we hit record a little bit, how challenging the fertility journey is. And kind of what we're saying today is, optimal health is a regulated nervous system. Optimal health is, not being in the sympathetic nervous system response for too long. And again, it's not bad to be there. It's bad to stay there for too long. And it's really difficult to not be there when you're going through a fertility journey. There's a lot of unprocessed emotion, particularly myself, who's had multiple losses. There's no time to process that grief because you still want the baby and you still want that outcome. So you're like, jumping into the next step. I've had a failed transfer. Next day, I'm on the computer, like, scheduling consults with different doctors. And that's like stressful and time consuming and overwhelming. I'm barely processing that this transfer just failed. So that gets really difficult to stay in a regulated state because you have so many unprocessed emotions, so much suppressed emotions. A lot of women, myself included, can like isolate when these things happen. So earlier when we're talking about like loneliness and co-regulation, that's not happening. So in terms of regulating, I would say find community that feels good for you. There are a lot of amazing communities out there that are supporting women through their fertility journeys. And for some, that feels great. And for some, that's a space to regulate and find safety, right? How are we bringing our body back to safety? That's not for everybody. For me, I have found talking one-on-one with somebody that's going through fertility or has been through it has been most helpful. So finding what works for you is really, really helpful. Acupuncture has been a great way to regulate my nervous system. Going out for walks has been a great way to regulate my nervous system. Kind of identifying stressors and taking things off my plate. So having better boundaries around your time and your emotions, right? If you're in this fertility journey and you have a friend that just doesn't get it and they're not creating safety in your body, or that they're not creating a space to express vulnerably, might be time to set a boundary around that person for right now. So yeah, boundaries are a great way to create regulation and safety. But it's hard. It's a really, really hard journey. So I want to say those things lightly. It's not easy to do those things. For me, one thing has been just more space. And then, I've shared a little bit, but about kind of like, what is the purpose? Kind of holding on to this idea that this was kind of meant to unfold for me in this way, and that there is a purpose to that. And that's been very helpful to me. So there's many ways, again, I say it lightly, it's a very difficult journey. It's a very taxing, overwhelming, sad journey. And we can be in constant states of stress. But yeah, finding the ways that work for you and keeping in mind the connection, like we're talking about today, between regulating your nervous system and what it's doing for your insides. And doing that has a direct correlation to optimizing your fertility health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I found what was really helpful for me was trusting the process, which again is like easier said than done. It wasn't like an overnight thing, but once I was able to just accept that like maybe now is not the time, and I could just like step back and de-stress and just really focus on all the great things I had in my life instead of just focusing on what I didn't have.
Yes.
Yeah. It definitely took some time, but then, and now here I am like 13 years later, I still don't have kids. Maybe it wasn't in my cards. I don't know. But if I had, I'm like, how different would my life be? I wouldn't have moved to Vegas. I wouldn't have met all the amazing friends I have out here. I don't know that I'd have a podcast with you, Lar, Biohacker Babes. I'm like, if I had a 13 and an 11-year-old at this point, like my life would be very different. And I'm very happy with my life. So yeah, I think trying to trust the process was the point of me saying that. Yeah, not always easy. Not always easy.
Yeah, not easy for sure. I agree with that. I had someone really great ask me a question, kind of floored me. And it feels like a very simplistic question, but she said to me, when have things not worked out? And I'm like, whoa, like things have always worked out. They don't always work out in the vision that we had thought. But she asked me that question. I'm like, yeah, I don't know something in my life that hasn't worked out. I know things in my life that worked out better than I had even imagined. And I think the work is kind of being in those in-between moments and finding joy and finding regulation and not being in states of chronic stress or emotional distress, because we get there at some point, and when we arrive there, for me, when I arrived at meeting my partner at 34, it all makes sense. And it was so valuable to have that time and learn more about myself. And when I had my son at 40, it made all the sense in the world to be a mom at 40, but it was those moments before those things where I was so distressed. And, we were saying earlier about this, the just relax narrative. Also, when I took the pressure of all those things, finding a partner and getting pregnant, they happened. And if we're thinking about the value of taking the pressure off and having a regulated nervous system to the correlation to immune health, inflammation, it all makes sense why things kind of came to be when there was less stress and pressure.
Yeah.
But another like easier said than done. Like just take the like focus on something else. What was there an inspired moment for you that helped you to just see another door that could open?
Like to both your points, it's easier said than done. It's been a lot of work, and even kind of having that evidence and those sort of points of validation that when you take the pressure off, it happens. I still have to work on doing that in the secondary infertility journey. So I want to normalize, like, we don't just constantly stay in those states. We have to work to be there. One thing I would say is like, take the thing you desire, like out of your face a little bit, right? Like, because when it's here, you can't see anything else. You can't see the things in your life that are going well, or things you can be grateful for, or a win, or it's like when this thing is in your face so much, you can't see anything. So like, just take it, put it in like the peripheral view a little bit, because it's still here. We want it. We desire it. Like, but then we can have this thing here, know we want it, and then we could see everything else. And then that's like a regulation technique. That's a way to de-stress. It's like, okay, I don't have this thing yet, but like, look at, now I can see all these other things, amazing things I have, like career, friendship, independence. So I would just say kind of get it out of your face a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just even stepping back, we say that in health optimization all the time. Like you can just step back and see the big picture. You kind of start to put the puzzle pieces together, or maybe you like forget something that was over here that was really important to you. So stepping back, having that bird's eye view, I think is helpful for so many reasons.
Oh my gosh. A change of perspective can shift so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, as we start to wrap up, if you could possibly answer this question, if you could go back to the beginning of your fertility journey, knowing what you know now about the system, any advice for someone just starting out to really advocate for themselves, knowing that it's kind of flawed?
Oh, it's so flawed. Yeah. Find a doctor that will listen to you. Find a doctor that will take their time with you. Find a doctor that will be open to ideas, suggestions, research that you found. I don't know one woman that's been through this that isn't their own like research, have a doctorate at this point, right? We're out there, we're searching their information. We're in communities that are giving us information. So find a doctor that's willing to listen and be open. Ask for a full thyroid panel before you even do anything. That's a crime that we don't ask for full. There is no full thyroid panel. Here's what I would do, and I don't know if this is the best answer, is I would see a functional medicine doctor before I ever went to a fertility doctor. I would have all my labs done. I would see what's going on. And I would work with them to optimize my health before I step foot in a fertility doctor's office.
Great advice.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you don't present it, just for you to know it yourself, to be empowered, right?
Yeah, knowledge is such power. I mean, I didn't know anything going into I literally, as someone that froze their eggs and had a child, I knew nothing going into my first transfer. I was so ill-equipped. And when, they told me my THS was high, I was like, and they reassured me that levothyroxine would do the trick 2 days before my transfer. I was like, okay, not the case.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty broken. And there's so much we can do preventatively or proactively before we're putting these, whether it's IUI or Emers. I mean, if you're transferring, that is just a delicate valuable, costs a lot of money. You put so much into getting this embryo, like optimize everything. Look at all your blood work, look at your insides, like your uterine lining, your everything. Look at everything before you think about transferring. That would be my advice.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. That's so important. Yeah. I mean, we could do a whole episode just about like the preconception path of like you're setting your body up to be healthy, your child's body to be healthy, and then now with what we know about passing that on genetically, generationally, it's like your health is going to impact your grandchildren, your great grandchildren. It's like there's so much we can do beforehand. So glad you shared
So
that.
much, but no, they're not saying that to us. So it's just
No.
really criminal. But yeah, functional medicine first.
Blow them up on your podcast.
I will.
Yes.
Ladies,
Here too. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we love what you're doing with quieting the clock. I think we could just continue this conversation. There's just so much more we need to unpack with the conversation between women. So thank you for what you're doing. One final question for you, Beth. Can you leave our audience with just one thing you think they should start doing today to optimize their health? Doesn't have to be fertility related, can be anything.
I would take 5 minutes in the morning, create some space, identify how you're feeling in the moment, and identify how you want to feel throughout the day. How do you want to move through that day? And it kind of sets the brain in this awareness space. And so I would say that it's a little quick. I think we all have 5 minutes in the morning. We can tell ourselves we don't have enough time, but like 5 minutes in the morning to kind of identify what you're feeling and then identify how you want to move through the day, how you want to feel throughout the day.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Simple
We can do that.
and effective.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
You.
This is so fun. We could talk to you
Oh my
all
gosh.
day, all day,
I know.
all day,
I
all
love
day.
our conversations. I love what you're doing. Thank you for all you're doing and for having me here.
Yeah. So Beth, tell our audience where they can find you, learn more about you, and find the podcast.
Sure. Yeah, we're on all the socials, TikTok, Instagram. It's Quiet the Clock Pod. And then we're on YouTube, anywhere you can find a podcast. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Stay tuned. We're doing some exciting things and great conversations there, I think, that are so needed. So come check us out.
Yes.
Awesome.
I love your podcast. I've been binging it since we connected a couple months ago.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Yeah. Yeah. Really great conversation. So thank you.
Well, thank you both. I'm just thrilled to be connected to you both.
Yeah.
Likewise. We're connected. We are friends now. And so glad to bring you to our audience. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks to everyone that tuned in. We will see you next time.